Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Our first story today takes us back to a rainy 1980s Christmas rush, where one man's kindness collided with another man's road rage. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My dad's revenge on a rude, impatient driver. This story comes from my dad, and it took place back in the early 80s, right around Christmas. Picture one of those massive, overcrowded mall parking lots, cars everywhere, people stressed, rain coming down, and holiday traffic bottlenecking into a single, miserable exit lane that fed into a road with multiple traffic lights. Leaving that mall on a good day was rough. Leaving it on a rainy December weekend was basically an endurance test. My dad was inching toward the exit when he noticed a car stuck a few vehicles ahead. The driver, an older woman, had run out of gas just feet away from the station across the street. She'd already trekked over in the cold rain, grabbed one of those tiny emergency gas cans, and was now standing in the downpour trying to pour fuel into her tank. The wind kept catching the spout, and she was shivering so badly she could barely hold the can steady. My dad, who was an engineer for the electric utility at the time and always carried his full set of safety rain gear, didn't hesitate. He threw on his waterproof jacket and pants, grabbed an umbrella, and went out to help her. He knew that meant two cars were now blocking the mall's only exit lane, but what else was he supposed to do? Leave her soaking wet in a dangerous spot while everyone behind her fumed? Well, apparently one guy several cars back had other ideas. As my dad was crouched over the woman's fuel tank, the traffic light turned green. The cars in front obviously couldn't move, but this genius decided to lean on his horn like it was going to magically teleport the woman's car out of the lane. The honking didn't stop. It got louder, angrier, and more insistent. My dad said he paused, looked over his shoulder, sighed, and then calmly handed the woman the umbrella so she wouldn't get even more soaked. Then he marched straight back toward the honking car. And keep in mind, my dad is a very fit 6'2" guy in full high-visibility rain gear, dripping wet and definitely not amused. The impatient man's tough guy act evaporated fast. He rolled his window down just enough to be heard. Before he could sputter out an excuse, my dad leaned toward the window and said, completely calmly, "Look, I'm trying to help this lady so she can get out of the way, but if you want to go put gas in her car yourself, I'll be more than happy to sit here and honk your horn for you." The man didn't say a word. He just rolled his window back up and sat perfectly still in the line of traffic like a scolded toddler. My dad walked back, finished helping the woman, and soon enough, her car started right up. Traffic finally moved again, and the honking man stayed dead silent the entire time. To this day, my dad still grins when he tells that story. A little patience and a big dose of humility goes a long way. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear a slicker, have a commanding presence, and will not kindly suffer fools. This made me happy. Thanks for the story, OP. And our second story. My mother felt entitled to my wife's family cottage. I grew up with a mother who treated entitlement like a religion. She wasn't just difficult, she was the type of person who could ruin your day before breakfast and make it your fault by lunch. My brothers and I learned early that her love always came with strings attached, bills with our names forged on them, and endless manipulation she justified as family helping family. By the time I hit adulthood, my credit was wrecked by utilities opened before I even turned 16, and she still acted like we owed her more. When I got engaged last year, she demanded money for a new vehicle or else your father won't have a way to get to the wedding. She framed it as urgent, life or death, like she always did. Your dad can't walk far with his back. You don't want him in pain, do you? Meanwhile, my dad never said a word about needing anything. My mother simply used his health as emotional currency whenever she wanted cash. That wasn't even close to the worst of it. She'd accuse my brothers, full-grown adults, of stealing whenever something went missing. She had my father forge my signature on a paycheck once because she needed the money more. She even claimed my 8-year-old nephew beat her and my dad. An actual 8-year-old. The lies were endless, but she delivered them with such conviction that half the time she had us double-guessing reality. The final straw came last year, and it started with something that wasn't even ours. My wife's family cottage. Her grandmother had always been incredibly generous, and one summer she offered my parents a week there. My wife and I didn't think twice about it. Why not let them enjoy it? That week turned into a disaster. The neighbors complained they weren't picking up after their dog. My dad apparently passed out on someone's dock and let the borrowed boat slam into it repeatedly, and somehow they even managed to start a fire under the cottage porch. My wife's grandmother was furious and told them they were only allowed back if someone from our family stayed with them. They'd proven they couldn't be trusted with a matchstick, let alone a cottage. Then the grandmother passed away, and ownership went to my wife's mother and uncle. A few months later, my mother called asking when she could have her cottage week. We told her we couldn't take time off work yet, so she'd have to wait. She blew up instantly. Well, since the grandmother's dead, I thought we didn't need babysitters anymore. I explained slowly that death does not magically void rules. The owners were still the owners, and they still required supervision. She huffed but ended the call. A few weeks later, she tried again, asking about a weekend. My wife and I said we'd check schedules with work and her parents. That was apparently offensive. Why do you have to ask them, she snapped. We're family. Because it's their property, I reminded her. By the end of that conversation, it was clear she thought she'd found a workaround. She wanted us there for the first day, just long enough to show our faces. Then she'd stay the rest of the week alone. I told her flat out it wasn't happening. She went quiet before finally saying, we'd feel like we were being babysat. I didn't even bother sugarcoating my reply. You are being babysat. That's why the rule exists. She hung up. I thought we were done. 2 days later, she texted asking for my wife's mother's number to discuss the restrictions. My wife immediately said no, understandably. My mother had already been snide, demanding, and rude. No way were we unleashing that on her parents. That's when the real meltdown began. She texted me, we can't get Hannah's mom's number? WTF have you been saying to them about us? My wife tried to de-escalate, said she'd ask her mother to call instead. That tiny attempt at peace triggered the ugliest tirade I've ever seen from my mother. Text after text came in. You and your brothers were a mistake. We should have never had kids. I should have thrown myself down the stairs when I was pregnant with you. That was it. I blocked her number. My wife stopped responding. It was clear nothing we said or did would ever be enough unless we let her control everything. I didn't tell her anything about the cottage owners because there was nothing to tell. She decided on her own that the world was conspiring against her, that we'd poison the well simply by refusing to enable her. She acted like she was entitled not just to our lives, but to my wife's family's property and peace. For the first time in my life, I cut contact, and my brothers, 3 men who'd been burned long before I finally woke up, were relieved for me. I was the last son still trying, still forgiving, still hoping she'd change. The silence since blocking her has been peaceful in a way I didn't realize was possible. My wife and I have slept better. My relationship with my brothers has never been stronger. My dad reaches out quietly sometimes, and I help him where I can. But the emotional hurricane that is my mother can no longer reach us. She burned every bridge and then blamed us for the smoke. Walking away from a parent's one of the hardest things a person can do. It's a grief that comes with a unique and complex pain. But you didn't walk away from a mother. You walked away from your abuser. And in doing so, you protected your wife, your peace, and the family you're building for yourself. And our next story. A Karen reported me for using a fake disabled permit. I only got my new UK disabled parking permit about a month ago, and somehow I've already managed to attract a full-blown Karen meltdown over it. After finishing a dialysis session, I had an appointment at the GP clinic located around the front of the hospital. I walk with crutches because of fatigue and weak bones, so rather than trek across the entire complex, I drove to the front car park, pulled into a disabled bay, placed my blue badge clearly on the dashboard, and set my time clock card. The appointment itself was quick, but the moment I stepped back outside, hobbling slowly across the pavement, I spotted a red-faced blonde woman hovering around my car. She had her phone out, snapping pictures of my number plate and of my blue badge like she was collecting evidence for some undercover documentary. As soon as she noticed me, she stormed toward me and launched into a full tirade before I even caught my breath. "Doesn't this piss you off? Fake parking permit? Taking slots from folks like us?" she shouted, practically spitting the words. I was exhausted from dialysis, hot from the 30-degree weather, and in no mood to participate in her investigation. I told her calmly that if she had concerns, she could report them to reception and they'd pass them on to security. I added that I was far too hot, tired, and in too much pain to get worked up about parking drama. Apparently that wasn't the answer she wanted. She grumbled about lack of support and spun around to walk away until she heard the beep of my car unlocking behind her. "It's yours?" she demanded. "Yeah," I said, "and you saw I use walking aids. It's not fake. I have every right to park here. Now kindly piss off. I'm too tired for idiots." She just stood there, stunned, as I opened the door, lowered myself into the seat, and backed out of the space. Honestly, I'm surprised she didn't try to complain that my reversing sensor beeps were too loud. It amazes me how quickly some people decide they're the disability police, especially when they're wrong. At least this one shut up long enough for me to drive off in peace. Update. I thought that would be the end of it. I genuinely believed telling her to piss off and driving away would close the chapter, but apparently Karen wasn't done with her crusade. While I was pulling out of the space, she marched straight into the GP clinic reception, still waving her phone. I didn't see it happen, but I heard the full story later from the receptionist, someone I've known for a while since I'm in and out of that clinic often. Karen burst inside, claiming a dangerous fraud was happening in the car park. She insisted someone was using a fake disabled permit, stealing spaces from real disabled people, and that staff needed to come out immediately and remove the vehicle. The receptionist asked very politely whether she had spoken to the person in question. Karen declared that she had and that he was aggressive and refused to explain himself, which the receptionist immediately found interesting because she knows exactly how drained and polite dialysis patients usually are. Security was called, not because anyone believed her, but because they needed to document whatever nonsense she was causing before she started shouting at patients. The hospital security officer who responded is ex-military, calm, and famously allergic to bullcrap. He followed her outside as she triumphantly led him to the car park, only to find the bay empty because I'd already left. Karen immediately switched tactics and tried to show him the pictures she'd taken as proof. He asked her one simple question. "Did you witness the person get out of the vehicle?" She proudly announces, yes, she had. "And was the person using walking aids?" That stopped her. She froze, sputtered, then said something along the lines of, "Well, that doesn't mean anything. People fake those too." At that point, security had heard enough. The receptionist who'd followed them outside told Karen directly that they knew who the badge belonged to, that I was a dialysis patient, and that I was entitled to use the disabled bay without question. The badge was legitimate, end of story. Karen, instead of accepting she was wrong, doubled down again and accused the staff of covering for scammers. Security cut her off, told her to stop shouting, and warned her that if she continued causing a disturbance on hospital grounds, she would be escorted off the premises and barred from returning without a medical appointment on record. She tried to argue, but the officer held up his hand and said, "You've made a false complaint, you caused distress to another patient, and you're disrupting staff during clinic hours. This is your only warning." According to staff, she stormed out muttering about incompetence and corruption, but the best part came a few minutes later. She'd parked in a 30-minute short-stay bay without paying, confident that she'd be too busy delivering justice for disabled people to get a ticket. While she was inside ranting, the parking enforcement officer made his rounds, and she got a fine, a big one. By the time she returned to her own car, she found the yellow slip on her windscreen. She stood there staring at it, stunned and shaking, before screeching something unintelligible and slamming her car door. Staff inside could hear her carry on all the way from the lobby. Meanwhile, I went home, collapsed into bed, and tried to recover from a physically draining day, only to receive a message from reception later saying, "Don't worry, we handled your situation, and your badge is perfectly valid. Rest up." In the end, the only person who faced consequences was the one who deserved them. And personally, that was more satisfying than anything I could have said to her myself. And our last story. The Great Chicken Scandal. How a libertarian gun store owner brought down a city council with a subpoena and a herd of loophole llamas. So we had a guy who was quite the libertarian. He owned a gun store in town and pretty much kept to himself. He'll be known as Lib Guy. The problem started when he decided to have chickens for his own eggs, but he lived within the city proper, which had a rule against farm animals within the city. This is a rural farming area I live in. One of the city council members, he shall be known as A-hole, discovered he had chickens a few weeks after he got them, and the city sent him a letter telling him he had to get rid of them. Well, he wasn't going to go down without a fight, so he spent some time looking into things and discovered the A-hole who reported him lived within the city and also had chickens. Well, this, of course, caused a bit of a scandal. The city ended up claiming there was a grandfather clause for anyone who had livestock within the city prior to the rule change 17 years ago. The problem with that was that clause applied to the a-hole's father, not the a-hole who lived at the same address. Needless to say, the war was on. A couple of weeks go by and the town cops are messing with Lib Guy over petty crap. Lib Guy somehow gets a recording of a-hole calling the police and lying to them about what Lib Guy was doing. Police now want to charge Lib Guy for some absurd, ridiculous recording law that really doesn't apply since it was someone with the police department who gave him the tape, not that he stole it. This gets blown up to the point where the bigger city's news crews are now showing up to the city council meetings that are being called to address this issue. These meetings are getting absurdly blown out of proportion, and in all honesty, somewhat slimy and jicky in how the city is handling it. Lib Guy subpoenas the city council emails to show there was a concerted effort to F with him and cover for a-hole. Well, in the course of getting the emails, it was discovered that there was a sexting issue going on between 3 of the city council members, LMAO. Believe me when I say this did not involve people that would be considered sexy. All 3, 2 women and 1 male, were married, 200 pounds plus, and in their 50s. In the end, the Lib Guy got the last laugh. He lost his chickens, but found a loophole where he could actually own llamas in the city since they were not considered livestock. So he put up a fence all around his yard, ugly chicken wire fence, just tall enough so the llamas couldn't get out by jumping. People actually would go walking their dogs and pet the llamas. The problem, though, was that llamas crap like cows and it stinks in such a small enclosure. This went on for about a year until he sold his house and moved. It stunk for at least a block around his property, and he lived right behind the town's grocery store. 2 of the council members involved got divorced over the sexting issue, and the 3rd one sold her bar because of it. This was the infamous chicken scandal that plagued my town of 4K for 3 years. Lib Guy is a folk hero. He exposed the rot, weaponized bureaucracy against itself, and left a stench that'll linger in the town's memory long after the actual smell faded. A messy, chaotic, and utterly deserved victory. What do you all think? Was the llama a step too far, or was it the only language the city council understood? Let's argue about it in the comments. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.